This story happened in the spring of 2022. Sally had booked a cabin. It was a small cabin in the middle of a forest, and around it were several similar cabins spread across the land. The owner of the place had made some very light pathways between the cabins, but none of them were clearly marked or obvious. Most likely they were only made while the owner was building and moving around inside the forest. Sally didn't have a specific plan for this trip. The place was only about 3 hours away from her house, and she just wanted to spend some time away, sitting among the trees. On the second day, she slept until noon. She woke up around 12, made some coffee, and sat inside the cabin in front of the heater, relaxing. A little before sunset, she put on something warm and went out for a walk. She didn't really know where she was going. She was walking along a narrow path in the forest, behind the cabin. She thought it might lead her to another cabin, and then she would turn around and come back using the same path. But about halfway through, as she went deeper into the forest, she noticed something. There were people standing in the distance, maybe about 200 or 300 meters away. Very far, there were two men standing completely still, not moving at all. They were looking at something on the ground. They weren't talking, and there was no reaction from them at all, except that they were focused on something on the forest floor. The scene was so strange that Sally kept watching them while continuing to walk, until she got farther away and couldn't see them anymore. She told herself maybe they were just people staying in other cabins taking a walk, and maybe from a distance it just looked stranger than it really was. At least she hoped that's what it was. She kept walking for a few more minutes, but then she started to notice that the path didn't turn. It was going deeper into the forest, far away from any other cabin, and with the image of those two men still in her mind, she felt something inside her telling her that she needed to go back. Almost at the exact same moment that thought came to her, she heard a sound behind her, a sound that made her heart stop from fear. It sounded like a strange scream, or like the cry of an animal, like a deer screaming. She turned around quickly and froze in place. The two men were standing on the same path behind her, a bit far away, maybe 150 meters. They weren't moving, but they were looking at her, as if they were staring directly at her from a distance. She couldn't be sure. The sound she heard felt louder and stranger than something they could make, even if they were trying to imitate an animal. The sound echoed through the entire forest, something she had never heard before, but the question that terrified her was, why were they behind her? She stood there, staring at them for about 10 or 15 seconds, and slowly, she started stepping back. And in that moment, they suddenly left the path and moved between the trees until they disappeared. Sally didn't move for a few minutes, because if she wanted to go back to the cabin, she had to pass through the same place where they had been standing, and she didn't want to go deeper into the forest either. After about 5 minutes, when she was sure they were gone, she quickly returned to the cabin, went inside, and locked herself in. She thought about calling the cabin owner and asking about the path or about those two men, but she felt like it would sound strange and exaggerated, so she stayed quiet. She added more wood to the heater and sat down, trying to calm herself. The sun had almost set, and she decided that she wouldn't go outside again for the rest of the night. Not that she would have gone out anyway. After what she had seen, she made some tea and sat in front of the heater. After about half an hour, she started to feel a little better and calmer, but that calm didn't last more than 15 minutes. Suddenly, she heard the sound again, the same sound she had heard in the forest, a long, deep scream. It sounded like it was coming from far away, but Sally couldn't tell how much the cabin walls blocked the sound, so she couldn't figure out if it was close or far. She stood up and looked out of the window behind her, but she didn't see anything except the lines of trees. The rest of the place was completely dark. The trees looked faded. Everything around her was dim, almost invisible. The darkness was overwhelming, and the more she stood there, the stronger her feeling of anxiety became. Her heart started beating faster, so she quickly closed the curtain. She picked up her phone and started searching for that sound. Maybe it was just some kind of animal common in the area that she didn't know about. Sally wasn't really someone who loved nature or knew much about it. She searched a lot, but couldn't find any explanation, and the more she read, the more her fear grew. So she put the phone down and tried to forget about it. After about another half hour, in the middle of the crackling sound of the heater, she suddenly heard footsteps right outside the cabin door. The sound of shoes hitting the wooden floor. They stopped exactly in front of the door. Sally's heart felt like it was about to jump out of her chest. About 20 seconds passed, but it felt like 20 minutes. Then she heard a soft knock on the door. She couldn't even describe the terror she felt as she slowly moved closer to the door and looked through the peephole. Standing outside were the two men, most likely the same ones she had seen in the forest. They were wearing cheap plastic animal masks, covering their faces. Both masks looked almost identical. Immediately, Sally started calling the police while stepping backward away from the door. She heard them knocking again while she was on the phone. She tried to speak, but she was sure they could hear her. She didn't even get the chance to fully explain what was happening, when suddenly, a loud, violent bang hit the door. For For a moment, she felt like they were going to break it down and come inside, a kind of fear she had never felt before in her life. But after that bang, she heard footsteps again, this time walking away. She moved closer to the door again and looked. She saw the two of them walking back into the forest. She waited for about half an hour until the police finally arrived. The officer found a mark on the door from the outside. Someone had stabbed a knife into it before leaving. The officer documented everything, but Sally wasn't sure if he actually believed her or not. Even she knew that what she was saying sounded crazy. After that, she left the place, and of course, she never went back to those cabins again. Every few months, she searches for news about that area, expecting to hear about strange disappearances in the forest, but until now, nothing has appeared. What those two men wanted from her, no one knows to this day. I had just gotten a promotion at my job last year. The salary increase wasn't that big, but the new position meant I would travel a lot, to different places across all the states. I wasn't in a relationship, and I wasn't married. There was nothing holding me back at that time.
So I was really excited about traveling. As for accommodation, it was always random. Sometimes hotels, sometimes resorts, and every now and then, it would be a small cabin. I don't know why they changed it every time, but I found it interesting. Anyway, this week I was going to a new city to visit one of the company's branches there, and they had booked a cabin for me nearby. I had been in this position for 8 months, so I was already used to it. The excitement of discovering where I would stay had faded a bit. As soon as the plane landed, I rented a car and started heading to the cabin address. From the beginning, I noticed that it was farther than usual from the company building. Normally, if it's a cabin, it would be very close to work, but this time, the drive took about 40 minutes, and when I arrived, around dawn, I felt like something was wrong. The place was huge, at least 4,000 to 5,000 square meters, with a large garden as well. I had to double-check the address multiple times to make sure it was correct, and it was. I took all my belongings inside. Honestly, even though the outside looked very nice, the inside wasn't at the same level. It looked a bit old for my taste, but I didn't complain. The space was much bigger than I needed. After such a long trip, I was too exhausted to explore the whole place, so I took my bags to the bedroom, turned off the lights, and went to bed. While I was lying there, I noticed that the entire house had knocking sounds. A lot of noise, not something scary, just the sound of wood and movement in the walls. I told myself maybe that's just how big houses are. I had never stayed in a house this large before, but unfortunately, I'm a light sleeper, so the noises kept me awake until
I realized I was thirsty. I hadn't eaten or drunk anything since the trip. I got up, a bit annoyed, knowing that once I got out of bed, it would be even harder to fall asleep again. I went down the long hallway and the stairs toward the kitchen. What was strange was that the moment I went downstairs, all the sounds I had been hearing suddenly disappeared, as if they were never there. It left me confused. I didn't know if I had been imagining things or if it was real. I grabbed a glass of water without even turning on the lights, then went back upstairs. After that, I managed to sleep, and the rest of the night was quiet. I didn't hear anything again. In the morning, I only had about half an hour before I woke up late, still tired, and rushed straight to work. After a long day, I went out with some of my colleagues to grab a drink and have dinner. I returned to the cabin after 11 p.m. I sat on the couch for a bit to relax, then remembered that I still hadn't explored the rest of the house. I felt like I should at least take a look around, so I got up and started walking through the rooms. As I moved around, I was honestly surprised by how big the cabin was. I even checked the price later and found it was similar to places much smaller in the same area, which was strange. I also noticed something else. Things weren't completely arranged, like the previous guest had left in a hurry. The place was clean, but there were pillows thrown on the couch and chairs placed randomly. It felt like someone had been there recently. The strangest thing was that one of the kitchen chairs was pulled out. In the morning, when I went into the kitchen, I was sure all the chairs had been pushed under the table. I told myself maybe I just didn't notice and pushed the chair back into place. After a quick look around, I decided to take a shower and sleep because I had another long day ahead. I was just about to fall asleep when the sounds came back again, the same knocking and movement. This time it was even more annoying because I was already about to sleep. I stayed still listening. Even though I was irritated, something about the sound didn't feel normal. It sounded like footsteps downstairs, maybe cabinets opening and closing. I couldn't tell if it was real or just my mind playing tricks on me. I quietly opened the door, but this time the sounds didn't stop. I could hear them clearly coming from the hallway. I went downstairs carefully, paying attention to every step on the wooden stairs, but the moment I stepped down, everything went silent again. My heart started beating faster. I reached the bottom and looked into the hallway, and that's when I noticed something. The kitchen light was on. I was sure I had turned off all the lights, but I thought maybe I forgot. I walked slowly and looked inside the kitchen. My eyes widened. The chair I had pushed back earlier was pulled out again, like someone had been sitting on it. And then I saw something else. In a dark room farther away, there was a person standing there, watching me from behind the chair. We stared at each other for a second. I was completely frozen. Then suddenly he moved back quickly, disappearing into the darkness. A second later, I heard the sound of a door slamming shut violently. I don't even know what I was thinking at that moment, but I ran toward that corner and turned on all the lights, searching for him. I didn't find anyone. There wasn't even a door in that area that could have made the sound I heard. I ran upstairs, grabbed my phone, rushed out of the house, got into my car, and drove away. I called the police. Unfortunately, I didn't get many answers. The owner of the house and the police spoke, but I felt like the owner didn't believe me, or thought I was lying. Maybe he just didn't want to take responsibility. The truth was, I didn't have any proof. I didn't even see the man's face. And the owner said there were no doors in the place where I claimed I heard the sound. The whole situation was disturbing. The company moved me to a hotel for the rest of the week, but I was confused and terrified for the rest of the trip. And honestly, if I had stayed in that house any longer, with whoever that person was, things could have turned out much worse.